So, I mean, I think the villains of the film obviously are George Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, John Yoo, and Gonzalez. But, the big criminal, I'm ashamed to say, is a woman called Carolyn Wood, who obviously did not interview for the film and has done absolutely no media. And, she went from prison to prison enforcing these torture methods. And as you say now, her punishment for this great violation of human rights and, the American way is to be, to end up in an interrogation training military facility. So, she's a complete villain. She does no media. She does nothing. And I guess the most interesting thing, one of the most interesting things in the film is, a bunch of these young officers, these ex-military guys that we have in the film who are young. I think it's fair to say a lot of them aren't overly educated and certainly weren't educated in the ways of the military. And they were thrown into these situations where they were untrained interrogators. Some of them had never come across the Geneva Conventions, and that's what the higher-ups wanted. And they were put into these incredible situations of stress, of fear of terrorism in America, that was placed on their shoulders, and that they had to get information by any means possible, often from innocent people who had just been picked up in the fields of Afghanistan. And what's so interesting is we managed to get a number of these people to talk to us, and I think they're the heroes of the film because they're so brave and they're so honest, and they know they did the wrong thing, but they're also willing to talk about the fact that they were misguided. And, when you're put into a bad situation, people do bad things.
Well, you also captured the essence. You also captured in the film the essence, and this is the point we've always made from guests and witnesses that we've had on just in a radio format, that this was the White House and their technocrats seducing the military, seducing the public, really trying to sell us on the most barbarous forms of torture. And everything in your film is documented. In fact, I don't want to say it's soft, it's horrible, it's about as hardcore as it can get, but reality is even several steps deeper and worse, like the Army's own report from General Tagumbu, where they admit raping the people, using acid with large objects. I mean, I can't even get into it on air, but this is even an MSNBC. So as bad as the film is, I want people to understand, and it was very upsetting even to me, I got tears in my eyes several times, studying torture the last 10 years, knowing our government for decades has been training the world how to torture. I think it makes the film even stronger that, you guys, I know, could have even made it more hardcore. And the CIA admits, we've had the former section chief on, that they wouldn't arrest real Al-Qaeda or Taliban. In fact, Taliban and Al-Qaeda would go just grab goat herders and turn them over and get $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 in some cases. And the bases even knew that they were innocent, but they would then send them on after being tortured out of Afghanistan, out of Iraq, to Camp X-Ray in Cuba to keep the cover-up going. And then the CIA brainwashing. I mean, it's just so incredible. And I'm trying to describe a 90-minute film here, and I guess it's impossible to do on radio.
Yeah, I mean that's really covered in our film. You're absolutely right. And one of the examples of that is, in order to tell this story in a cinematic and interesting way, we had to find a story and a metaphor for what this government is doing and what torture can do to people. And we found that in the story of Dilawar, who's this young Afghani cab driver who's innocently picked up and sent to Bagram, where he's, as you say, he's pulpified to death. Essentially, he's beaten by the military, and he ends up dead. And he was picked up in a cab he was driving with two other people who were both innocent, and they were actually, after Dilawar died, they were sent on for absolutely no reason. It was proven that they were innocent, and they were sent to Guantanamo, where they remained for a couple of years. They've since been released and returned to Afghanistan. But it was just about filling up this facility. It was about saving face for the government. It was about getting 500 men with dark skin and showing them to the world in orange jumpsuits as terrorists. And it's incomprehensible to me. And it's incomprehensible to me that some of the Republican, front runners who are no longer, thank goodness, in the upcoming elections, we're saying we need to double the size of Guantanamo, based on what, this incredible success. I mean, come on, it just doesn't make any sense. Having made this film and being so au fait with all of this material, it still just is like a bad movie.
Well, Eva, your film's been done for a year, but it's very timely now because they're going to try a bunch of these people who have no connection to 9/11, and after 6 years of incarceration and torture, even mainstream news is saying you can't believe anything they say, and then these trials aren't even real trials. So now we're going to have kangaroo courts 6 years later?
Well, and the death penalty is what they're going for. I mean, it's unbelievable, and we have a number of human rights attorneys in the film, and they talk about the fact that they had no access to their clients for many years and how preposterous that was. And one of my favourite comments and one of my favourite characters is Clive Stafford Smith, who's an English human rights attorney, and he says, when I was studying in America, it never crossed my mind that I would be having trouble to get access to my clients and that my clients would have no right to a trial. I mean, it just makes no sense. It's the same kind of thought for me as, I'm 38 years old, and when I was studying, and I'm Australian, and when I was studying in Australia legal studies, learning about these great precedent cases like Roe versus Wade, and suddenly, 25, 30 years later, there's a possibility that they'll be turned over, and it just doesn't make sense. It seems like the world's a little backwards these days.
Well, what they do is, and you point this out, they get everybody into fear, and then they try to set the precedent to be able to torture children. In fact, let's go ahead and you've got two different John Yoo clips. Play the short one, John, first. This is John Yoo in the CFR being questioned by Professor Castle about writing that they can sexually torture children. Here it is.
The argument making about adaptation of the rules is a question of what the United States should do as a matter of international law, which I treat as being a separate and distinct body of law from domestic conflict.
So in other words, if the president deems that he's got to torture somebody, including by crushing the testicles of the person's child, there is no law that can stop that.
No treaty.
And then also no law by Congress. That's what you wrote in the August 2002 memo.
I think it depends on why the president thinks he needs to do that. I don't think presidents will ever do that.
And then even the elitists, the CFR in Chicago, laugh at him. Eva Orner, the Justice Department's investigating him. There's talk of indictments against John Yoo now, Eva.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable. I mean, I won't believe it till I see it. But, I always feel like these guys who are involved in this administration have so heavily self-protected themselves. I feel like they've written in all of this legislation to protect themselves from any kind of questioning or any possibility.
Stay there. Let's talk about it on the other side. Eva Orner's coming straight on for the neocon Bush administration. She's in papers all over the world saying war criminals run our government. And if we don't bring them to justice, it'll then be in our name. And people will see Americans as the Germans were seen after Hitler. I mean, this is hardcore murder of innocent people who they knew were innocent, literally just to have the illusion while Bush is saying, don't go after bin Laden, who he supposedly said attacked us. Meanwhile, let's take some, 15, 13, in some cases, year-old kids. Let's torture them. Eva Orner, you've got a delivery coming to your hotel room here in just a minute. You may have to drop off and then come back for a few minutes with us. But there's so many facets. Other areas of the film, Taxi to the Dark Side, that just won the Academy Award Sunday night for Best Documentary. Other facets, points I haven't brought up. What do you think the most chilling and upsetting part of the film is? I mean, you're the expert on this. You lead.
I mean, oh God, what is the most chilling part? To me, it's really the images. It's really, well, it's actually, what the saddest thing to me in the whole film is at the end of the film when you find out, the fate of a number of soldiers who were involved in torture and brutal interrogation techniques, and when you see what happened to their lives, and you see that these kids in their 20s, usually from the South, I think it's fair to say, their lives are ruined. One of them says that financially he's ruined. He can't get a job. They've spent time in military prison, and these are the victims of the administration, and and everyone else who's going to leave this current administration that already goes on to prestigious jobs, and nothing happens to them. And I guess that's why I've been saying that, branding them as war criminals in the media, because that's what war criminals do. They commit acts of atrocity and they get away with it. And I think that's probably aside from all the images of torture and all of the terrible images that we see, I really think it's these innocent people who signed up, who served our country, unlike most of the people in the current administration, who then got scapegoated into and ended up in prison.
Well, speaking of that, Eva, I remember it was even in the Associated Press and other news wires a few years ago one of the guards in Afghanistan, a private contractor who tortured people to death, he was about to blow the whistle and said, look, we were ordered to, and then they used the Patriot Act on him to shut him up.
Quiet. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just, it's just incredible evil to me. I mean, I think another thing that's really worth talking about is the fact that, we're all obviously, pretty far on the left side, all of us filmmakers, but it was really important for us to make this not a left-wing, propaganda piece. And so one of the things we were very cautious and careful to do was to try and get insiders in the Republican side of the country to talk. And, people like Alberto Moura, who was the former Navy General Counsel, and he was very much behind stopping what was going on at Abu Ghraib. So I just think it's really worth letting audiences know that this is not a propaganda piece. It's really, it's a journalistic piece.
No, I'm going to say right now,
a dramatic piece.